Big Z Reviews. Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, is the newest fantasy series from Amazon that just finished its first season that cost apparently $1 billion. And I actually really enjoyed it.
My brother gave his life hunting the enemy. His task is now mine. Stand with me. Ours was no chance meeting. Not fate. Nor destiny. Ours was the work of something greater.
So this was created by Patrick McKay and John D. Payne. Two guys that have never done anything else and somehow got a $1 billion show as their first project. And this is funny thing because I read the Lord of the Rings books and I enjoyed them, but they're not precious to me. So I think this is kind of if Lord of the Rings is really precious to you, you might hate this show because it's very clear that they had a story they wanted to tell, and it gets weird because when Amazon bought the rights from the Tolkien family, they only bought the Lord of the Rings books. They do not have the rights to anything in the Silmarillion or any of the other Tolkien books that he wrote or were published posthumously. So if there are things that aren't quite right, well, the only person you can blame is the Tolkien family, really. Because, they're still holding out on the Silmarillion for some reason. And what we got is, a telling of the origin of the Rings of Power. Because, the only thing they can tell is, whatever is in the Lord of the Rings movies. And I guess they didn't want to redo the Lord of the Rings movies, which could have been interesting to see, much more true to book, TV series of the Lord of the Rings movies. I kind of would like to see that. But, instead you have a prequel to Lord of the Rings. And it has some of the stuff that, a little bit of prequelitis, but that, okay, they have to introduce these characters. They're fan favorites. They're probably going to pop up. But there is some cool stuff, though, that they play around with. Because, there are some twists and turns with, you don't know who some characters may be. And, there's a lot of fun stuff with this, It's fun seeing a really expensive fantasy show done well. But I definitely can see why some people may not like it. Definitely who I'd consider the main character of this show is Galadriel. This time portrayed by Morfydd Clark. And I really do like her. I think she does a great job. Although it's tough to compare her to the Galadriel from the movies, which was so perfect. But, this is a young Galadriel. And I think she does really well with it. She's on the hunt for revenge because Sauron killed her brother. And, she thinks he's still out there while all the rest of the elves think that he's gone. And, that is an interesting story. And then you also have, a couple of different things. She, teams up with Charlie Vickers playing Halbrand, which is, he's supposed to be, he might be the lost king of the Southlands. And then you have, they go in and they meet the lost city from that you see them passing by in the movies. They have to try to get them to help them go to the Southlands because the orcs are rising and taking over and killing a bunch of people. And on that side you have Ismael Cruz Cordova as Arondir, and he's a pretty cool elf, and he's a soldier, and he's trying to, save some of the people in the Southlands from the orcs. And there are some really cool Legolas-style action scenes with him. I would have liked even more, but what we got was pretty fun and pretty cool. And along with that storyline, you have Nazine Bunyadi as Bronwyn, and and Tyro Muhaffadine as Theo, as her kid. That may or may not be the son of the elf. Not very clear. It doesn't have elf ears, but it's implying that there's not many other in their town. There aren't any other black people in it. But there's they have like a tell story where he finds like this weird evil looking sword, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. And that storyline's okay. I mean, that's really based on the rise of the orcs, and they have to fight them off. And there's some, like I said, there's some good battle scenes there, but definitely there's not too much battle yet. And there's like one episode which is really, they really go all out, and I really appreciated. But and then you have the Hobbit storyline with Markella Kavanagh as Nori Brandy Foot, and she is like a young hobbit, and she finds this person fell from this sky and crashed down, and it's played by Daniel Wayman. He's like this named like the Stranger, and he's like some sort of wizard. You don't know if he's good or evil. And like I love they do some cool stuff with I think they use like forced perspective like from the movies, but they also might be using like face replacement or just like different ways to do it. But like, he looks huge among them. They do that really well though, and there's it's some interesting things with them. But definitely that is the slower part of the show. Like those sections can drag at times, but it has a really cool end result. And the kind of at the end, like everything kind of comes together, all the storylines kind of come together for the climax, and like I enjoyed a lot of it. And then you also have another section that the story tells with Robert Aramayo as Elrond, and he is like kind of meets up with the dwarf with Owain Arthur as Prince Durin, and he is like he has like he found some mithril, and he's like the elf thinks that they're to be the savior of like this the special ore will be the savior of the elvish race because their light is dimming and their tree is dying, and they need to make the rings of power essentially. And I think there's some cool stuff with them and the dwarves. It's fun, and all the set pieces are so gorgeous and huge. But I feel like it kind of with the elf, he and pretty much all of the elves, especially the male elves, they just don't look elvish at all. Except for like the one that's funny, the one that may look the most elvish, the one that people complain about because of his complexion, Arondir. But I think especially with Elrond, the actor that plays him, Robert Aramayo, he has the most squarish face I've maybe ever seen. Like he looks like a Minecraft character, and it's just doesn't look at all like the original actor from the movie or how I would picture Elrond. And I think that like so many of the dwarves, so many of the elves, like especially like the Elf King, and so many of them just look like dudes with elf ears on. Like I think that so much of like how the movies portrayed him, I think works so well. Is like the really tall people, tall, beautiful people with long faces, and they look perfect as elves. And I feel like for some reason they didn't try to do that here, and especially the male elves. Like none of them really look like elves. But I don't know. I guess that's like it's kind of he's kind of the secondary main character almost. I would say, like especially for the second half of the season, like he plays a big role. But I mean, like the whole show, I mean, it's a good time, I've waited for so long to see more fantasy shows, done well, and this is cool. It's cool to see it. I just I wish that all the set pieces are gorgeous. They obviously spend a lot of money on the show, and it looks great, and it has an interesting storyline. I mean, like there's like. Again, if you're a Tolkien purist, you might hate a lot of stuff they do, but I didn't mind it. Like I never read the Similarian. I tried, and I couldn't really get through it as like it wasn't for me. But as a whole, it's a fun show. I think the problem though is that I wish they would have spent, instead of spending $1 billion on a show that doesn't have like a book, that doesn't have a story. This is a story as a creation from the two dudes that made the show. This really doesn't have any like that stuff may have happened and for like token like in the annotations of the Lord of the Rings books, but like this wasn't part of the story. The story is what we see in the movies. This is just like a weird prequel that someone made up and they put $1 billion into. And I kind of wish that, instead of, just because it has the name The Lord of the Rings, like the name is that valuable, like I wish being a huge fantasy fan, like I dream about seeing some of my favorite book series on screen, like winning the lottery and making a TV show of my favorite books, like that's so like I can't help but wish like instead of giving $1 billion to this random Lord of the Rings show, and same with the Game of Thrones shows, all the different Game of Thrones shows that aren't the main story of the books. Like I just wish they would. It's because they have the established name. I wish they instead would throw money behind new stories, like new actual stories that with books that are written that they can follow and they can do a really cool story from them. So because of that, I'm gonna do a little offshoot. Not even really talking about Lord of the Rings anymore, but for the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power show, I probably give it like an 8 out of 10. Maybe 7.75 out of 10. I enjoyed it, but it's nothing spectacular. Like when I look back at this season, there's nothing that really stands out that much. Like I'll have to give a rewatch sometime coming up, like maybe before they do the next season. But like I don't feel like much of the show will stay with me, and that's a bit of a disappointment. But at the same time, I still did really enjoy my time with it. So to start out with books that I think Amazon should throw money at instead of doing another season of Rings of Power. Starting out is Robin Hobb series. This is the first book of the first trilogy in her like massive 12 book trilogy, 13 book series, like all set in the same world. And this is like it's such a good book, such a good series. Probably my favorite series of all time. And like I just Robin Hobb, like I always feel like she's kind of criminally underrated. Like if you're a fantasy fan, I think you know about her, but I think the average person has probably never even heard of her or read her books. And I think that's a shame because I mean, her books are so heartfelt and so interesting because this is about a character named Fifth Chivalry Farseer, and he is a bastard prince, and he is like he has to overcome so much because he is like he has like magical powers, like he has he can like talk, and he has two different magical powers essentially, but he can like one is kind of outlawed in the Six Duchies or whatever, that like, he can talk and bond with animals, and like one he bonds with is a wolf, and there's some great stuff with that. But then there's like the skill, and that's like more the power of the nobility, and that you can like talk to people from far distances and go into people's minds and do so many interesting things with it. And like it's these series of books, you go like it's like three trilogies with Fitz. Then was also the Fool was like his best friend, and that like he is like they're like he's also a really interesting character he has this almost non-binary, but like is like psychic sort of thing where he sees the future and he tries to put the world in a better path and trying to bring back dragons into the world because they mostly went extinct. I guess so many interesting things about this. And when I picture a show for this, I look a lot at like the show called Outlander, because like a lot of this feel like you could do it in the style of Outlander, because it's most of the show is like it's really only for the whole series, except for like they in between, like she did like the three trilogies with Fitz, like she has like in between those she did other stories in the same world with some of the same characters, and like so like there's you could do great stuff with that too, because it a whole set of different characters and it's kind of really different story to tell. But the main one, like he is, fits that's your viewpoint character. So like it's very different from a lot of these other ones that have so many different characters, and they really get sometimes it's tough to keep track of. With Lord of the Rings, I was trying to look through all the different names, like trying to figure out all the people are, and like this is like it's really a story about this and Fitz, and he's the bastard prince, and he has to like save the realm and change their world, and there's so much good stuff here that I would love to see some sort of show about. And the second one is Scott Lynch and the Lies of Locke Lamora. Like that is the first book, and it might be one of my favorite books I've ever read. Like the first one is so good, and the actual series is the Gentleman Bastard series, and he is like it's like a fantasy heist book, and I think how I would do this, like because I feel like there's a movie within the book, but then there's a lot of extra stuff. Like I would love to see like a movie and then a series, like a TV series, going into the behind like the background info and all the character and all the stuff that is not part of the main heist storyline. But I mean, this is such a good book, and it has like three other books now, and they're all good, but the first one is definitely the best. And the only problem is this is an unfinished series. That's one of the problems when you get in some of my favorite fantasy series. A lot of them are unfinished, and the authors have anxiety and they have a lot of trouble finishing it. But I mean, I think now Scott Lynch, he had revealed that he's gone on new meds and he's trying to deal with his anxiety, and he's getting better, and he's publishing some short stories that are going to be coming out soon, like in this world. So hopefully he can continue with the books. But like this is just like a bunch of characters that are kind of outcasts in this fantasy world, where like they like are followers of the god of like the god people don't talk about, that like he's like the god of thieves, and they will always like they want to try to pull heists, and like don't even really do anything with the money. Some of them may just like toss it out, but it's all about like doing the thievery, and there's a lot of great stuff with it. But like the first book especially is so perfect, and like the story is so well crafted, and it's like I love to see a fantasy heist film or a fantasy heist series. And the third one is this probably for a long time I consider might be my favorite book. But that's the Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and this actually like a couple years ago he sold the rights to like Legendary, I think, and he sold the rights like they were gonna do like a TV show, a movie, and a game, but it's kind of been silent on that front for a couple years now. So I doubt it's actually going to happen. But I think it would be an excellent show, because it's about a guy named Kvothe, and he's like, as his he as a young child, he's part of like a traveling group of performers and singers, and like and these his parents were producing this like epic of these like demons, and the demons don't like that their parents are doing research, and singing songs about them and saying their names, and kills like the whole family and the whole troop, but leaves him there, and he has to, survive. And he goes to, like, he's like a street urchin for a bit, and then he goes to a school for, like, a magic school, a magic college kinda, and that's a lot of the book is at the magic college, and that is like it's some really interesting stuff with like sympathy, where how like you can like if you link things together, you can make them move. Like you can a lot of cool stuff with that. And the only problem with this book is there are only two books in the series, and it's been like a decade since the last book. And this is like I said, there's another one that's an unfinished fantasy series, and there's some weird stuff with like the publisher or the editor said like she didn't even believe that there was a third book, that she hadn't seen anything from him for years. So I don't know, like with like that's the thing though with some of these fantasy books. If you do an unfinished series like with Game of Thrones, do you really want to commit yourself to it when you don't know what actually is going to happen in the end? So I don't know. And for number 4, it's The Broken Empire by Mark Lawrence. And that's the first book is Prince of Thorns. And it's a really interesting book because essentially it's set in our world, but like thousands of years in the future. And like there is like a post-apocalyptic event like nuclear war, and also these scientists like broke the fabric of reality, where like people, if enough people can believe something, it become true. Essentially, they like brought magic into the world, and also like the oceans have raised by dozens of feet. So like most of the world is completely different. But it's like so interesting how it does it. It's like it's not very clear what the world is, but then like Jalen will go into a bar and they'll be singing the Beatles song, and it's like some really interesting stuff here. But I think the only problem with it is it's violent. Like Jalen, he starts out, as like a child soldier essentially. Like he was a prince, and he is like with his mom and his like little brother, and like there's his uncle or someone, I think it's his uncle, like comes, or something related to the parent, that like a different kingdom, neighboring kingdom, comes and kills his mother and his little brother. But like the mother throws him into the bushes to hide him, to try to save him, but she doesn't realize the bushes are these horrible thorn bushes that he almost bleeds to death before like his dad's soldiers come save him way after the fact. And like the dad is an asshole, but he doesn't want to start a war with the neighboring kingdom, so like he just kind of lets it go and gets remarried, and he leaves, and like he sets a bunch of prisoners free, and they become like a band of bandits. And like that's the thing, a lot of people that have trouble with the first book, especially because like he's not doing the raping and pillaging, but he's kind of commanding it, and that's like it's tough, like it's trigger warning for like some stuff. And like, but I love this because he is so, like, if someone's messing with him, like he'll just take a sword out and kill him. Like it's so many great moments in the series. But I almost wonder if it would be like better like as an animated TV show, like Arcane or like Invincible, where you can almost kind of get away with more violence and stuff when it's animated. But I would love to see some form of this, on the screen, because there's so much great stuff here. And number 5 is the Riria Revelations, and this is like one of the Death of Dolgas. Is like a prequel, like adventure of the characters like before the main books. But in the series, you essentially have Hadrian and Royce, and they're like these two partners in crime, that like mercenaries that go on adventures, and they get pulled into an adventure that's way bigger than anything they had planned for, and it turns into this whole journey. And it's kind of like a lighter, kind of a little bit swords and sorcery sort of fare, but it's like a really good series. And I think could make for a fun show because actually the story it tells is really well crafted and tight. And as of that, like the author Michael J. Sullivan, like he most authors would like after the success of the series they would add on to the end of the story, and he is still has refused to do that. Like they have the perfect ending, so instead of messing with it, he like did prequels, and he went like thousands of years in the past and did like a series of books from in that in the same world but earlier on, and they aren't as good as the main series, but there's still a lot of good stuff here. And I think it's just again, I'd love to see some sort of like fantasy heist. Yeah, I kind of like I think that it would be so good, you know, in on a TV show or on the movie or something. I really want to see something like that. And lastly, for this is just like an additional one, which I don't think I don't know if it'd be a good TV show, but the this is book 3 that just came out of the Scholomance trilogy. The first one is A Deadly Education. Like, I actually reviewed it a couple years ago, but essentially this is the author Naomi Novik. It's like her kind of destruction or like de-evolution or just her own version of, you know, Harry Potter. You know, that, but she's a completely different way of doing it. But like obviously she's a huge fan of Harry Potter, but like I think like this is because because you know J.K. Rowling has revealed herself to be kind of a shitty person. Instead of like supporting her books, you could support this book. And I think these would make amazing movies because they're not, the books aren't that big. They're each about this size, and they tell a pretty tight story. That I think that it's essentially it's just that this but you know in this it's essentially like this world, they all of the like the wizarding children, they are sent to this school because in the world they are very attractive to all the different monsters in the world, and they want to eat the children for their mana. And so essentially they send them to the school. Well, maybe like only half of them will survive, but it'd be better results than being out in the wild before they know how to use their powers and defend themselves. And like the main character, she is like she is like born from like her mother was pregnant when they left the school, and her dad like died like on the graduation battle. And like but the mother is like one of the world's most famous healers, and is like just the most perfect person, like the nicest person in the world. And the whole like the idea with the magic is the magic always seeks balance. So because the mother is such a good person, she gives birth to a sorceress that could destroy the world. You know, and but the thing is that's kind of about like nature versus nurture, because the mom still tries to like teach her how to be good, but like she is always kind of fighting her instincts, because like if she wanted to, she could be the most evil sorceress in the world, but instead she tries to be all strict mana, where she only uses like her own energy. She doesn't take anyone else's energy. And like, but the thing is so funny because like the school, there are no teachers unlike Hogwarts, but like the school was built to try to make the different sorcerers and sorceresses like as good as they can be. And so but they whatever you're good at, so the school keeps trying to give her like destruction spells and spells that designed to take control over a city of people. You know, it's just like, but she's always like, well, I can't use that. Like some really interesting stuff is also like a romance angle with like the hot sorcerer that's like they going around always saving people from the monsters. But like there is a lot of great stuff here, and I think it would make an amazing movies. So that's all I got. So thanks for watching. If you want to see more of me, you can subscribe down below. Thanks.